we are diving in for part 2, welcome back, of this conversation about Ballerina Farm. And not just the woman behind Ballerina Farm, but a wider conversation about trad wife influencers, gender roles as they pertain to stay-at-home motherhood and the home, and how the expectations and norms of society and culture play into our choice to take that role and what it looks like. And then to how what we celebrate as a culture and what we celebrate on social media plays into the world that we're creating and those continued expectations of women and mothers. I published part 1, which was met with very mixed responses. We're going to dive into it and some of the comments because my goal was to create conversation, not to spark provocative, polarized conversation, but just to really talk about some of these questions. If you're new here, hi, welcome. I am Kezia. This is my little home in the south of England. And my goal on the internet is to make lower footprint, sustainable, conscious living feel less complicated and more budget friendly. 2 things it often is not. And one of the comments people gave about me diving into this topic was, this is not your normal content. It is not. However, if we are going to look at making lower footprint living, sustainable living, that whole thing, if we're going to look at making that more simple, we have to look at who is bearing the burden of making it happen. And one of the things that I have heard repeatedly from you viewers who are mainly women, you are the one pushing for this journey in your home, and that it is not met with the support of a partner, and that the mental load of taking on these additional things, thinking about sustainability, learning new routines, doing things differently, spending differently, consuming differently, is a huge mental load and practical load in the week that is not shared. And so then we have to talk about these stereotypical gender roles, the way things are split in the home, to open up this conversation of how that pertains to the sustainability and kind of ethical consuming conversation. In 1980, there was a British social attitudes survey done where 48% of people said they think it is the man's job to go out to work and the women's job to stay home. In 2023, the survey was done again, and only 9% of people said they thought it was a woman's job to stay home and a man's job to go out to work. So our thoughts about gender roles are changing, but in the same survey, 63% of women said they did more than their fair share of housework. Only 9% of people think that gender stereotype is the correct one. 63% of women feel they do more than their fair share. So what we're seeing is, while attitudes are changing, many of us were raised with a norm that men and women have very different roles in life and there is a right way to do it. And that has probably come into our thinking whether or not we're now part of that 9% that would agree with it or the 91% that wouldn't. But also, even if our conscious thought on it has changed, the way it plays out at home isn't always in line with that. There was also a Pew survey done in the last few years that showed that in opposite-sex marriages, where both people are earning about equally, women spend hours less time on leisure and more on caregiving and household work. So that's not where we've chosen traditional gender roles and decided that a woman is at home doing those things, but where they are doing comparable earning work, a huge amount more is on the woman in opposite-sex relationships than on men. So we're seeing that while thought is changing, there's this idea that is still affecting us in our homes. And so, because sustainability and making it feel less complicated is what I share on here, to talk about this piece of how it's affecting us as we take it on. in the previous video, which I will link below, I really looked at the life of Ballerina Farm. And she is a Mormon mother of 8, big lifestyle kind of motherhood, cooking, farm life influencer. And she has kind of become one of the big online trad wife influencers, which I think is fascinating because I, spoiler, do not think she's a trad wife. But so I looked a bit at her life. She is based in Utah. They run a farm, but also a huge online brand. They being her and her husband, Daniel Neeleman, who runs their farm and is also the heir to many companies, including JetBlue. It's called Ballerina Farm because she's an ex-ballerina. She left behind that life when she married Daniel, and they moved to Utah and set up this farm, which she is now the co-CEO of. There was a Times piece that came out last year questioning whether this was the life that she chose. And ultimately, we will never know. That's the end of the story. Unless we are personal friends with her, we will never know. But as I pondered it, it really made me ask more questions about the choices that we make career-wise in terms of motherhood and careers and stay-at-home motherhood and more traditional roles. As in, how much when choosing a role of stay-at-home mother, traditional wife, is that being chosen fully out of freedom, unconnected to cultural influence, family influence, religious influence, gender stereotypes that we have been raised with, different things? How much is that influencing that choice? And how much is it a truly free choice, both in a perceived way and a more unperceived way? And I wanted to explore it because it is really my heart that women get to choose the career path that they want. If they want to be a stay-at-home mother, that they get to choose that freely from an array of career choices, where staying at home and being a full-time mother is as much a choice as other things. And that provisions in terms of pay and pay gaps and parental leave and childcare support that, but also the norms of society support that as a career choice, not as an expectation. And currently in our society, that is not where we are. And there are many ways that we can see that this is not where we are. As well as looking at who Ballerina Farm is, Hannah Neeleman, I looked at what a trad wife is, which I do not think it is her. It is someone who believes in and adheres to traditional gender roles. And then there are many different definitions depending on where you look. I don't think that's what Hannah is. She is co-CEO with her husband. She is a businesswoman. But the way she portrays life online is often aspired to by people wanting more traditional gender roles. But because I've seen sometimes that be destructive when we look at each other online and see what other people are doing and go, how on earth is that happening? One of the things I wanted to do was to draw different things that she has said online and pull them together. Not to say, gotcha, Hannah Neeleman, but to say, hey, people who view her content quickly or who haven't dived into the full story, here are just a couple things about her life that you might not see at first glance that might help in that journey of comparison that we can often find online. Things like, she kind of looks like a homeschool mum. She says, you know, they homeschool their kids or they educate them at home, or I'm not quite sure what her language is, but it reads as she's a mum sitting down to homeschool her kids. They actually employ a teacher from the local town who comes and teaches their school-age kids. Now, there is nothing wrong with this. Nothing at all. I don't think she's deceptive in how she posts about it, but because of the way we consume content online, getting little snippets from here and there without seeing the full story, this can lead to people feeling like, why on earth can't I homeschool? It's so simple for her. She's doing it for so many kids. And also she's got no childcare, but she's doing all of this stuff. So what I wanted to say is, hey, she's not being dishonest. But what we might not catch in watching her is that she doesn't have childcare, but she is sending a lot of her kids out to be with a teacher for a portion of the day. So what you might in comparison read as she's got all 8 kids with her and she's homeschooling them and there's no childcare actually is some of those kids being at home while she's not homeschooling, and a lot of her kids are being looked after by somebody else. Now, she's not being dishonest, but I wanted to draw some truths from her life together and say, hey, we have to understand what we are looking at so we can healthily build our aspirations and healthily celebrate people for what they are doing, but just understand where that fits as we build our own lives and our own aspirations. The responses were far-ranging in the video altogether, from like, this is the most needed conversation and the best video I've seen on it, to this is icky and how could you tear another woman down, which was not my heart. My heart is for a better world for all women. But I think one thing sometimes we can lose on the internet currently, where we view things really quickly and it can get polarized and we want to come to the defense of people we love, or we want to criticize people we disagree with, is the difference between critical thinking and criticizing somebody. And this is really what I was trying to do. We can ask questions or use her life to ask questions, to explore things, to look at what might be and ask questions of society. We can have both of celebrating her life, not being critical of her life, but thinking critically about some of the realities and also the impact of viewing this content, and to ask certain questions that maybe we'll never know the answer to, but to explore the pieces of life that we don't see, or to explore some of the things that might surround her life or the lives of others, or how society plays into some of these things. So I am not remotely critical of having a teacher. I do want to explore how it affects people when they think she's a homeschooling mother who's also teaching and also has no childcare. So we want to explore, ask questions, but it doesn't mean we're criticizing someone's life. And I think we have to hold those a little bit differently. And this was my goal. And I think it's something we have to realize that we really can do and desperately need to do in the age of the internet. I am sure Hannah Needleman is a wonderful woman. Also, I have questions about society and its impact on women. And I have questions about some of the things that she has said in terms of what influences there are on her choice in life. Ultimately, we don't know, but we can ask these questions to explore important topics. So we want this world where women can choose their career path, where we can choose what a gender means in terms of our role. That is my goal and my hope. We do not live there as a society. And it helps, I think, to go back and look at some history to realize just how recently these things were part of the way the world worked in terms of things that are now so normal. So if we just look at money, in 1974 in the States, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act was passed. And this was the first time that a law had said, so this is just 50 years ago, that women could have a bank account without a man signing. It didn't mean that prior to that a man had to sign. It doesn't mean that after that there was no discrimination. But just to say, before 50 years ago, it was completely lawful to deny a woman a bank account without the signature of a man. 50 years is one generation up. It's our parents or our grandparents and the world that they were raised in and what formed their norms that then spoke into our lives and shaped us. The following year, in 1975, the Sex Discrimination Act was passed in the UK, which equated to the same thing. I think it's just really important to realize that, so that we can go in and look at, even though we might be the 91% that thinks that gender should not influence things, or these things might still be ingrained in our thinking. A lot of people said, why can't you just let her live her life? And if you look on pretty much any piece of content that Hannah Needleman, Ballerina Farm posts, you will see pushback. And then someone will come out with this comment, why can't you just let her live her life? And a lot of that is two very critical or harsh comments that do not need to be made. But I don't think that exploring some of these questions about what we're viewing and its impact and what might be affecting her, we don't know, but asking these questions about the person and the content and the lifestyle that a lot of people are aspiring to, that is important and not criticism. And it is not letting her live her life. In fact, I would argue it is the opposite. For her to get to truly live her life, we want to know that we have a society and that we are shaping our thought and our norms and our culture and the way we raise our kids to have a world where women can live their lives. So I think actually looking at the way society impacts women and gender roles and the careers and the choices that we make and the way that it might be ingrained in our thinking and rooting it out and thinking about it and exploring it and changing the way that we think, I think that is exactly playing into letting her and all women live their life. The way people say, why can't you let her live her life? And to let her live her life is to let all women live their lives. And we know we don't live in a society that fully does that. So we have to do some of this exploration to make that true, to make that possible for all women. My fight is not against her. Sure, we explored some different pieces of her life. My fight is against the culture and the society that we live in and the expectation on women to do certain things just because they are a woman. And I do want to let her live her own life. But currently, society, norms, gender roles, expectations, many things are not building a society where that is truly possible. So then there is the Mrs. World piece. To catch you up on this, 2 weeks after having her 8th baby, Hannah Neeleman competed in Mrs. World. About a few days postpartum, she started doing exercises, gentle workouts to get herself ready for Mrs. World. I asked some questions of this in terms of what it is creating in society to celebrate that success postpartum looks like getting up, getting in a dress, and walking across a stage as a picture of what married beauty looks like, which is what the pageant is. It's for married women, celebrating beauty, intellect, community efforts, different things. I have been guilty here. I have 100% held the belief that snapping back, getting back out in the world, fitting our jeans back on, and is the impressive thing. It's what we aspire to. It's what is strength. And through 3 different postpartum seasons, I have had that unpicked to realize that as I celebrate weight loss postpartum, getting back into jeans postpartum, pushing for a certain body, pushing to be out in the world postpartum, I am building a culture that builds that as the thing we celebrate and elevates that postpartum journey as better, which is not a postpartum journey we know more and more medically that is beneficial to women's bodies. It is a celebration that is actually detrimental. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to celebrate something postpartum that is detrimental to people. Now, there is a big difference between what someone's body just does look like postpartum and what people work for and aspire to and celebrate postpartum. So my second child, I walked out of the hospital and I remember my mom said to me, "Where is your bump?" It was 24 hours after I had a baby. I was wearing a baggy jumper, but I had no bump. I have no criticism of my body for not having a bump. That was how it was, my second child. That was how it was. My third child, I looked 9 months pregnant with a very taut belly for 5 days postpartum. Equally beautiful, brilliant, and perfect because it is what my body did with no effort or assistance those 2 different times. The piece I want to explore and think about in terms of what we celebrate is what we say about those 2 things. So with my second child, I got really unhealthy postpartum. We had severe colic. I lost a lot of weight, too much weight. I didn't realize I had lost that much weight. Everyone in that lowest weight moment came out and celebrated my body. "You look so good, you've bounced back." I gained weight, got healthier, started getting more sleep. No one celebrated my body because we've been told in society that losing weight postpartum is the goal and what we aim for. And we're building something that is not helping women. And this is what I wanted to explore with this Miss World piece. And she gets to do Mrs. World. If she wants to go and do Mrs. World, I don't want to take that away from her. I'm sure it was for her an accomplishment. It was something she worked for and she achieved. That doesn't mean that is amazing. She did something that for her was an accomplishment and was amazing. It doesn't make it universally amazing to do that postpartum. For many, it would be medically not advised. But it can be for her an achievement while we also look at, do we want to widely celebrate women working out postpartum to fit into a dress, to celebrate that as a picture of beauty? For her to have that freedom, we have to critically think about it and talk about it and explore some of these questions, which can happen without it being criticism of her. We can have both. And I would say that kind of sums up what I was trying to explore in this conversation is we want Ballerina Farm, every trad wife everywhere, to choose the life that they want to have. That's the goal. The goal is that choice. But we also have to be aware of the world in which we and they are choosing, and know that right now it is a world with many influences on what the role of a woman should be, both structural and cultural, and in many different places. It is not a world where we have that carefree, unhindered ability to choose a career path and what motherhood should look like and all of those things. And I think about it like, if I, with my kids, offer them a free morning of activities, whatever they want to do, but always when they colour, I take half their colours away, and then I tell them they're not good enough at art. And whenever they cook, I tell them that they're just not good enough and they're not following the recipe well. But when they write a piece of writing, I explore it with them and I get in there and I celebrate their writing and their handwriting and I tell them they're amazing. Or when they read a book, we cuddle up on the sofa and we make it a warm, inviting time. If I then say, hey kids, what would you like to do this morning? I have to realize that I'm giving them choice, but that choice exists within a lot of context. And to really understand the activity they want to do, truly, I have to set up a different reality of choice. I have to change the world in which they are making those choices to understand what their actual choices would be, uninfluenced by the structure that I have set up for them. And this is my point here. For us to leave women alone and let them do what they want in life, we have to look at the world in which they are choosing. We have to look at the broader world to understand what is truly in their hearts to do and what they truly want to do in life and in motherhood. This is why I think this is such an important conversation, because I want to be able to say, leave her alone, let her live her life, she chose it. But the world that we are currently living in, I don't think we can often say that, and that is my goal. So that is why I felt like this was a really important conversation. I'm going to wrap it up there, but please leave any comments. We can continue this conversation, but my goal is that she gets to live her life and that we can truly say she's living her life, the life she wants, leave her alone. And that we know that we know that we know that that is exactly what is happening, and that then that is the same for all of us. Anyway, if you want to go back and see part 1, you can see that here. Hit subscribe if you want more of the regular, just making lower footprint living more simple, less complicated, more budget friendly. That is what I am here for, and all the different things that influence it. Thanks for joining, and I will see you in another video sometime soon.